Burma, Bosnia, Kashmir, Rwanda. These are all places I have no doubt everyone in this room knows of and about. I didn't growing up as a teenager in America, which is pretty outrageous when you think at the time televisions would have been filled with images, violent images of conflict in those countries. And I was a oblivious teenager, not a conscientious one. Unfortunately, Texas, growing up in the suburbs of Texas, did not make me into a citizen of the world. It barely made me into anything more than a citizen of Texas. But at the age of 22, I graduated college, I had a passport, and I came here. I came to London, and everything changed. I was exposed to ideas that were like an assault. I met people from all over the world. I learned about so many cultures. In that moment, the world opened up to me, and I opened up to it. And the most transformational piece of information came my way, which is with a passport and a little bit of cash, and admittedly some privilege, I could go anywhere in the world. And ultimately, I would go to all of those countries. But first, I set off to places like Peru, where for the first time I saw poverty so revolting. We certainly have poverty in our own countries and in my country, but not like this. I traveled to Rwanda, and I met with victims from the genocide, face to face. I traveled to Thailand and was invited to some refugee camps along the Thai-Burma border and met with people who had escaped such suffering, starvation, and conflict, and they carried on. And this changed me forever. And I came back to the US, and I knew at that point I had to do something. I had to contribute to the world. I had to be a citizen of the world. And I went to law school. And after 3 years of law school, I became a corporate and securities lawyer at a big law firm. Don't be too hard on me. I had mounting student debt, and human rights jobs were few and far between. But luck would strike. Before I started the job, I was given a 1-year reprieve. The economy had just tanked, and they asked that I go away for a year. And I did. Bought a one-way ticket to India. Spent time in India, went back to Southeast Asia, this time inside Burma. And the day that I left to go to Burma, I met someone that gave me a book. It was a book called The Heart Must Break. And they said, you must read this book. It's about a British national who came to Burma to challenge the junta in control of the government at the time, calling for democratic reform and respect for human rights. And I took that book, and I went to Burma, and I read that book, and I got to meet people all over the country, and I was so overwhelmed by how many of them came up to me, living in darkness and saying, do you know what's happening here? And I was able to carry to them the message that we did care. They just weren't receiving it, but we were there for them. And I left Burma, and I got back to India, and I looked up all the various people that were in the book. I took note of various people. And one of the people in the book that was most credited with the release of this British national, James Maudsley was his name, was this lawyer, young American lawyer named Jared Genser. And he had since gone to work for a law firm in Washington, D.C., and he had started an organization called Freedom Now. It was an all-volunteer group that did exactly what he did on James Maudsley's case, which was to get him out of jail. James Maudsley was released in under 2 years. And when I thought, I want to work for that organization, I want to volunteer with that organization, 2 weeks later, I was notified that, in fact, the law firm that I would be starting with in a couple of months was merging with Jared Genser's law firm. And it was like the serendipitous lightning bolts. And I let the dust settle on the merger, I think, for 2 weeks. And I reached out to him, and within a month's time, I was working on human rights cases in Iran. I was working on human rights cases in South Africa. I was able to work on behalf of Václav Havel, the first democratic president of the Czech Republic, and Desmond Tutu, to put together a report called Threat to the Peace, calling for UN Security Council action in Burma. And from there, I was becoming the human rights lawyer I wanted to be. Admittedly, it was a circuitous route. but it's what I wanted to do, and I got there. And certainly there was some luck. It was hard to see my trajectory as anything if not just fated. From there, I went to South Africa. I worked in Johannesburg, working with jurists and lawyers all over Southern Africa, providing legal assistance on cases of great importance in those countries. Prison rights and prison reform in Malawi, media freedoms in Namibia, crimes against humanity in Zimbabwe. It's one thing to sit in a room and hear from victims of human rights violations what has happened to them. And I've sat in that room more times than I ever thought that I would, or sometimes think I can handle. But I'll tell you, sitting in a room and listening to a perpetrator of these crimes, someone who committed such ghastly violations of their fellow citizens, was more than I could take. I left, I went back to the US, and at that point, a really incredible opportunity opened up, and I was able to start the organization Freedom Now properly. I was able to start our first office in Washington, D.C. And it was in that role I was able to take on individual cases of political prisoners, people who were arrested because of their advocacy and their challenge of the system and their belief in peaceful and stability in their communities being the way forward, being the only way forward. I was able to work on Aung San Suu Kyi's case and help get her released. She is now today the unofficial leader of her country, Burma. I was able to work on President Nasheed, the first democratically elected president of the Maldives, who was just released earlier this year and is now in the UK, and now here addressing global issues like climate change and combating radical Islam. But there's also the unsung heroes. There is the journalist in Azerbaijan fighting against corruption. There is the singer in Cameroon singing songs about the exploitation of people there and calling for reform. There is the Catholic priest in Vietnam yearning for freedoms that all people can appreciate and enjoy. And it's been working on their behalf that's truly been the most incredible moment or opportunity in this journey. These people, they are the peacemakers, they are the change makers in their communities. The best that I'm able to do for them while they're creating the bridges in their homes, while they are combating all of these ills of society and trying to create stability and progress at home. I'm merely trying to make a bridge to them to carry their voice out of the country while they are locked away, while they are silenced and imprisoned somewhere, often for very long periods of time and in really, really terrible conditions. I do my part. I want to leave you with a quote from a political prisoner, a Soviet political prisoner, the novelist Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who said, "The salvation of mankind lies only in making everything the concern of all." And that, to me, is what it's about, because everything is the concern of all. There are no borders. Politicians are feebly continuing to try to make borders, but we will build bridges over those borders because we are an interconnected world. This is an interconnected city. This is a perfect place for these talks. And I urge everyone here today to not be me, turning away from the screen when you see violent images and unrest in other countries or poverty in Peru, but to embrace that as your own challenge, within your own community, and fight it with the same vigor that you would if it were in your own home. Thank you.